Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we're here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion which will take place in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, obviously, being the poetry discussion playlist, but number two, a poem-by-poem read-along for, picking up all my papers, Sylvia Plath's Big Yellow Book. So this is, I don't know, like the 26th? Yeah, the 26th. I got that exactly right. The 26th poetry discussion in this playlist, but we're approaching 400 videos in the poetry discussion in general playlist. The poem in discussion today, the poem in question, The Shrike by Sylvia Plath. It reads as such. When night comes black, such royal dreams beckon this man as lift him apart from his earthwife's side, to wing, sleep-feathered the singular air, while she, envious bride, cannot follow after, but lies with her blank brown eyes starved wide, twisting curses in the tangled sheet with taloned fingers, shaking in her skull's cage the stuffed shape of her flown mate, escaped among moon-plumaged strangers, so hungered she must wait in rage until bird-racketing dawn, when her shrike face leans to peck open those locked lids, to eat crowns, palace, all that night long stole her mail, and with red beak spike and suck out last blood drop of that truant heart. Last blood drop of that truant heart. That is a tattoo if I've ever heard one. Now, I have one great big question about this poem with which we will end this discussion, but there's a couple things worth talking about first. It's difficult to parse emotion into work. This is why a lot of writers use the sauce to write. It's easy to edit emotion out of writing. It is almost impossible to edit emotionality into writing. This feels like the emotions have been parsed back a bit, but this poem almost has the focus/unfocus of teen angst, doesn't it? You feel the emotion behind our speaker here, that feeling of mad at everything because I'm mad at something. That is what this poem feels like, mad at everything because I'm mad at something. And hey, punk, right? That's punk. How punk? We've all been there. We know that feeling. And that's going to come back when I get to the great big question at the end of this poem, because at the end of this discussion, because I think that this poem is very close. And you know, how hoity-toity and condescending for me from a YouTube channel to be saying, oh, Sylvia Plath almost got it with this one. But I think you'll understand what I mean by the time we get there. Now, it is interesting, the Shrike. Do you know what that means? Shrike? Maybe you know. Maybe you picked it up along the lines of the poem. This is a shrike. Now, I perused the Wikipedia entry on shrike, and I got a couple interesting notes. Number one, their beaks are hooked. Right in there. Like those of a bird of prey, reflecting their carnivorous nature. Their calls are strident. So we have this very emotional poem, this very strident poem, being put out there by Sylvia Plath in a way that is reflective of the bird of choice, the titular bird. Also, the carnivorous part comes back at the end, When her shrike face leans to peck open those locked lids to eat crowns, palace, all, that night long stole her mail, and with red beak spike and suck out last blood drop of that truant heart. Yeah, man, far out, right? But there's another note here. Shrikes are generally monogamous. Breeders. Pardon me, I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Shrikes are generally monogamous breeders, although polygamy has been recorded in some species. Polygamy. It's a funny word. I always thought the word was polygamy. Well, that's a word too. Polygamy means multiple partners might be involved. Polygyny, I mean, if you just look at the root of that word, maybe root is the wrong word to put out there. What do you think the seminal nature of that is? That is referring to women. So a polygynous, not a polygamous. A polygynous has nothing to do with a pint of beer. A polygynous relationship has to do with one male, multiple women. So again, we have a brilliant choice of our titular bird here. But here's what I want to ask about this poem. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Is this a great poem? Now, I am not the biggest scholar of Sylvia Plath's work. I am not the most familiar with her. In fact, her poetry is often very challenging for me. Is this one of her great poems? I've never heard of it. Again, that might be because of me. That might not be because of it's not published a lot. It might not be because this is not one of her more anthologized works. But I don't know it, guys. I don't know this poem. This was my first reading thereof. But I think it's close. I think it's close to being a great poem. What do I mean by that? What does a great poem do? If you think of all the great poems you know, what do they do? Oftentimes, there is unique language. Oftentimes, there is language that frames the world in a way that makes you reconceptualize it. For example, I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Okay, I took the road less traveled by. Now, I am thinking about the road itself in a metaphorical fashion. Because the language itself framed it as such. There is also, oftentimes, with this idea of unique language, there is oftentimes language which you can, how do I want to say this? Make it new, right? That was, Make It New, that was Ezra Pound, I believe. His school of writing, you wanted to make things new. You wanted to show us something, and probably we've seen that something before. But if you can show it to us in a new way, baby, we've never been there before. Make it new. The red wheelbarrow. That is showing us that thing, which is very mundane, perhaps the definition of mundane, but it's giving it to us in this new light. It's giving it to us, it's showing it to us in this new way, a way which shines the light of the author upon the thing. This certainly has that. Escaped among moon-plumaged strangers. You can remember that phrase forever. Last blood drop of that truant heart. Yeah, man, far out. I'm there. Such royal dreams beckon this man. Royal dreams, a guy getting up in the middle of the night to go screw around? I can dig it, right? So this poem has the unique language, strong metaphor. Oftentimes in poetry, there is strong metaphor. In great poetry, there's almost always strong metaphor. That's kind of what we do with poetry, metaphor or simile. This has the shrike. We talked about how the shrike is a generally monogamous bird. Sometimes they're polygynous. They are carnivorous. They are shrill types of birds. If I can tempt the fates of the feminist professors that I had. All of these things are contributing to the shrike itself being a strong metaphor with this poem. Oftentimes, in great poetry, there is strong emotion. We talked at the very beginning about how this poem is almost, very close to teen angst. That I'm mad at everything because I'm mad at something, right? That idea of the anger spilling out into general residual being. Now I have to sit here. Where's the It's in here someplace. I've lost it. With taloned fingers shaking in her skull's cage, the stuffed shape of her flown mate escaped among moon-plumaged strangers. So hungered, she must wait in rage. I'm just sitting here shaking. I'm so angry, right? That's strong emotion, and I think we can. I think you can feel that emotion in this poem. I think it's very on the tip of the tongue with this poem. I don't think there is any effort made to really bury it here. Not necessarily that there has to be. I think it could have been reined back a little bit, but certainly it's there. So you cannot deny that the strong emotion that is generally connected with great poetry is present in this poem. But I'm wondering if this is lacking one thing. I'm wondering if this poem lacks one element that great, transcendent poetry usually has. It kind of always has. Almost it has to have. I can't think of a way for it not to have it, especially maybe in today's world. I think maybe I'll get to that later. Does this poem explain our speaker's situation in a way that proves it as universal? Now, what do I mean by that? Great poetry, the greatest poetry, the poems that will live forever, they are about the reader, not the speaker. Think of all of Emily Dickinson's proclamation poetry. I did this because I did that. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. What that poem really bears out is that, hey, probably you're letting your life pass you by. Probably you're not noticing it. It's about you. It's not about any great thing that our speaker has done. I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb, when one who died for truth was laying in an adjoining room. Another Emily Dickinson great poem. They're all great, by the way. What is that poem doing? It is linking beauty and truth. And in a deeper way, it's asking you, do you live for either of these things? The poem goes on to say that both of those things are actually the very same thing. So, do you live for these things? Are you there for that thing? Are you real? Are you authentic? That's what we're talking about in that poem. It's about the reader, not the speaker who dies for beauty. It's about the reader. The reader didn't die for beauty. I mean, probably. We don't know if we read after death, but probably. There are so many great proclamation poems from Emily Dickinson, but all of them, I tried to think a lonelier thing. We've all been there. It's not about the speaker, it's about you. Does this poem make it about you? Now, if you've been in this situation, surely you can feel that way. But that's the thing about great poetry. That's the thing about transcendent poetry. You do not have to have done the thing. You do not have to be looking at the red wheelbarrow to know that red wheelbarrow is you. You don't have to have died for beauty for that to be you. You don't have to sit there and try to think a lonelier thing. That poem is about you. You don't have to have done that exercise. I wonder that this poem is too close to scratch. I wonder that this poem is too much on the nose. I wonder if this poem is not far enough away from the subject matter. I wonder if that is why perhaps this is not one of Sylvia Plath's most read poems, because everything else, boy, it's in there. Everything else is spot on. Everything else is on the money. I just don't know if the poem is really about the reader here. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what I do on this channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel. There's poetry every Monday. There are multiple read-alongs going on the channel right now, and I hope to have you back for the next one.